Vin Diesel had been away for weeks, busy filming his latest movie. He was used to the fast-paced world of Hollywood, but when he finally returned to his peaceful farm, he was looking forward to some much-needed rest. His farm was his sanctuary, a place to unwind and reconnect with nature. However, as he pulled up the long driveway, something wasn't right. From a distance, he could see the outlines of large machines, cranes, and workers moving around. His heart skipped a beat. As he drove closer, he realized something that made his blood run cold. A hotel was being built right on his land. Vin slammed on the brakes, his car coming to an abrupt stop. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. He stepped out of the car, his boots crunching against the gravel. The sound of construction echoed in the distance, and workers were too busy to notice him. "What the hell is going on?" Vin muttered under his breath as he walked closer to the site. The building was massive, far bigger than any hotel he had ever seen before. It looked like the kind of luxury resort you'd find in the city, with large glass windows, sleek modern architecture, and the unmistakable buzz of a construction project in full swing. But this wasn't the city. This was his farm. He approached one of the workers, a man with a hard hat and a clipboard, and asked, "Hey, what's going on here? Who authorized this?" The worker looked up, barely recognizing Vin Diesel, but then quickly glanced at his clipboard and shrugged. This is part of the development plan for the neighborhood. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, approved the project." Vin's brow furrowed in confusion. He had been living here for years, and never once had he been told about a development plan involving his property. He thought back to the day he bought the farm, the peaceful life, away from the chaos. There was never a mention of any plans to turn his land into something else. "Development plan?" Vin repeated, disbelief evident in his voice. "I never signed anything for this. You need to stop this project right now." The worker seemed nervous, shifting on his feet. I'm just following orders, man. You should talk to the HOA if you've got a problem. They're the ones who approved it." Vin's frustration grew. The idea that the HOA, a group of people who lived in the nearby neighborhood, could just take over his land without any permission was absurd. Who were they to make decisions about his property? He immediately called his assistant, but she wasn't available. He tried his lawyer, but the phone rang out. His chest tightened as the reality of the situation hit him. This wasn't just an ordinary misunderstanding. Someone somewhere had made a huge mistake. Or worse, someone had done this on purpose. Vin stood there watching the workers continue with their tasks, his fingers clenched into fists. Every minute that passed only deepened the sense of violation he felt. This was his land, his sanctuary. No one had the right to take it from him, especially without any warning. Vin took a deep breath and tried to think through his options. First, he needed answers. He had to know how this could have happened. He quickly pulled out his phone and called the HOA office, determined to get to the bottom of things. "Hello, this is Vin Diesel. I own the property at 1452 Greenfield Road. Someone's building a hotel on my land, and I need to know why this is happening," he said as soon as someone picked up. The voice on the other end sounded casual, almost dismissive. "Oh, Mr. Diesel, yes, we've been working on this project for months. It's part of the community development plan. I'm sure you've received the notices about it?" Vin's jaw tightened. "Notices? I never received any notice, and I never agreed to this." The voice hesitated. "Well, I'm afraid that's how it is. The project is moving forward, and we've already started construction. If you have any issues, you can contact our legal team." Without another word, Vinny hung up the phone. He knew that the HOA wasn't going to listen to reason. This was no simple mistake. It was a deliberate attempt to take his land and build on it without his permission. Standing there, with the hotel rising before him, Vin's thoughts were clear. He was done asking questions. He was done waiting for answers. It was time to act. Vin turned on his heel and walked back to his car. As he reached for the door, he stopped and pulled out his phone once more. He made a single decisive call to his lawyer. "It's time," he said quietly, his voice firm with determination. The wheels of justice would turn, and Vin Diesel wasn't going to let anyone get away with this. Not without a fight. The next Move was crucial. The battle had only just begun. Vin Diesel sat in his car, his mind racing. The phone call to his lawyer was a moment of clarity. The moment he said, "It's time," he knew there was no turning back. The situation had escalated beyond a simple misunderstanding. It was now a full-blown legal battle. As Vin made his way back to his house, he couldn't shake the thought of what the workers were building on his land. They were still busy, unaware that the man they were building on was about to take a stand. He couldn't let this injustice happen. The land was more than just dirt and grass to him. It was where he found peace, and no one had the right to take that from him. The next morning, Vin woke up early, even earlier than usual. His phone had been buzzing with messages, calls, and news reports about the construction happening on his property. He had expected the media to catch wind of the situation, but now that they had, the pressure was on. He knew he had to act quickly. The longer he waited, the more the project would move forward, and the harder it would be to stop it. Vin grabbed his coffee and walked out onto his porch. He could see the hotel construction in the distance, the steel beams rising higher and higher with each passing hour. The workers were busy, oblivious to the storm that was coming their way. His farm had always been his sanctuary, and now it was becoming a battlefield. His lawyer, Miranda Hall, arrived just after sunrise. She was sharp, experienced, and known for her fierce determination. As she stepped out of her car, she looked over at the construction site with a raised eyebrow. "What exactly is going on here, Vin?" she asked. "They've built a hotel without my permission. The HOA approved it without even notifying me," Vin explained, his voice tight with frustration. Miranda studied the construction for a moment, then turned to him. "This is illegal, and I'm going to make sure they know that. But we need to move fast. The longer they continue, the harder it will be to undo this." Vin nodded. "I need this stopped now." She took out her phone and quickly began drafting a letter. "I'm going to send a cease and desist letter to the HOA and the construction company immediately. That should put them on notice that you're serious." But Vin knew this would be just the beginning. He was no stranger to the way things worked in the world of Hollywood and business. This was going to be a fight, not just against the HOA, but against an entire system that believed they could take whatever they wanted. "I don't want this to just go away," Vin said, his voice steady but firm. "I want them to understand that this is my land. I don't care how much money they have or how much power they think they hold. They need to be held accountable." Miranda gave him a knowing smile. "That's the attitude we need. Let's get to work." Later that day, as the construction workers continued their work, a messenger arrived at the site. The HOA's legal team received a formal letter from Miranda's office, demanding that all construction cease immediately. It was clear that they hadn't expected Vin to fight back like this, and for the first time, they were on the defensive. As Ika says, Vin sat in his study later that evening. He couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For the first time since he had returned to his farm, he felt like he was finally doing something about the injustice. But he knew this was only the beginning. The HOA wouldn't give up easily. They were powerful, and they wouldn't back down without a fight. Vin's phone buzzed again, and he looked down at the screen. The message was from his lawyer. "They're not happy. We'll need to take this to court if they don't stop." He let out a deep breath and sat back in his chair. This wasn't just about a hotel. It was about standing up for what was right. As the sun began to set over his land, Vin Diesel knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. Cliffhanger. The next morning, he received an unexpected phone call from the HOA's lawyer. "Mr. Diesel, we'd like to settle this issue out of court, but there's a catch." The following morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, casting a soft glow over the land, Vin Diesel sat in his study, his thoughts a mixture of determination and uncertainty. He had expected resistance, but the phone call from the HOA's lawyer was more than he had anticipated. The phone buzzed again, interrupting his thoughts. It was Miranda, his lawyer. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of disbelief. The HOA has sent us an offer to settle out of court, but here's the catch. Vin sat up straighter, his grip tightening around his coffee cup. What's the catch? He asked, already knowing it wouldn't be something simple. They're offering you a payout, quite a large sum actually. But in exchange they want you to sell a portion of your land to them. And not just any part. They want the prime area where they're building the hotel. They're trying to turn it into a resort. Vin's eyebrows furrowed as he processed the offer. It wasn't just money they were offering. It was the very piece of land that meant the most to him. The area where he spent countless hours walking, thinking, and finding peace. No way. Vin replied instantly. I don't care how much money they offer. That's my land. They can't just buy their way through this. I agree, Miranda said, a determined edge to her voice. But you need to understand, they've got resources. They're trying to pressure you into a corner. The question is, are you ready for the battle that's coming next? Vin glanced out the window at the construction site, where the workers were still moving forward, seemingly unaware of the storm that was brewing. He was already committed to fighting back, but the thought of facing an even bigger legal battle weighed heavily on him. He was used to challenges, but this wasn't just any challenge, this was personal. Send them the response, Vin said, his voice firm. Tell them I'm not interested in their offer. Let's take it to court. Miranda agreed. I'll handle it, but you need to be prepared for what's coming next. This fight is just beginning. Later that day, a new wave of tension spread through the small town. Word had gotten out that Vin Diesel was standing his ground against the HOA. The community was divided. Some supported him, while others wondered why he was risking so much over a piece of land. Meanwhile, the construction workers, still unaware of the unfolding legal drama, continued their work. They had been told nothing about the legal threats, and they were simply following orders from above. But that would change soon enough. As Vin stood on his porch, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Miranda. They're not happy. We need to prepare for court. Vin nodded to himself. He wasn't going to back down. The stakes were high, but his resolve was even higher. This wasn't about money or land. It was about protecting what was rightfully his. That night, Vin stayed up late, poring over the legal documents Miranda had prepared. He knew the HOA was powerful, but he wasn't just an actor or a celebrity. He was a man who had worked hard for everything he had, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that from him without a fight. The next day, as he walked toward his car, he saw a news van parked outside his gate. A reporter approached him with a microphone, eager to get his side of the story. Mr. Diesel, can you confirm that you've refused the HOA's settlement offer? What's your next move? Vin paused, looking at the reporter. The cameras were rolling, but he wasn't interested in playing the game of public relations. He had something to say, and he was going to say it. I'm not here to talk about money or deals, Vin said, his voice calm but firm. I'm here to protect what's mine. This land is my home. I'm not going to let anyone take it from me. Not the HOA, not anyone. The reporter seemed taken aback by his words, and the camera captured the determination in Vin's eyes. As the reporter backed away, Vin climbed into his car, the wheels of change already in motion. The legal battle was about to intensify, and he was ready for whatever came next. Cliffhanger. That afternoon, as the news of his refusal spread, Vin received a mysterious package in the mail. Inside, he found a blueprint of the hotel with a message written in bold letters. You won't win this fight. Vin's heart raced as he stared at the message. It was clear now. The HOA wasn't just trying to take his land. They were sending a warning. Vin Diesel sat at his desk, looking over the legal documents Miranda had sent him. His office was quiet, but his mind was racing. The message from the HOA had struck a nerve. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about his family's legacy and the fight for something that couldn't be bought. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Miranda again. Vin, we've got a date in court, she said, her voice steady but serious. And they're not backing down. The HOA has brought in top lawyers, and they're prepared for a long battle. Vin exhaled slowly. He had expected this. The HOA wasn't going to give up without a fight, but neither was he. I'm not backing down either. Let's show them what this is really about. The first day of the court hearing arrived, and the courtroom was filled with tension. The HOA had come prepared, with a team of lawyers and witnesses ready to defend their case. On the other side of the room, Vin sat with Miranda, his expression calm but determined. He wasn't used to courtrooms, but he knew this fight was different. This time, he wasn't just defending his property. He was standing up for his principles. As the judge called the proceedings to order, the HOA's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Harper, stood up. His opening statement was filled with legal jargon, and he painted Vin as an unreasonable landowner who refused to cooperate for the benefit of the community. He's causing unnecessary trouble for the neighborhood, Richard argued. The hotel project would bring in jobs, tourism, and revenue to the area. The land in question is prime real estate, and we have the right to use it for the greater good. Vin listened, his jaw clenched. It wasn't just about money or development, it was about control. The HOA wanted to dictate what he could do with his property, and he wasn't going to let that happen. When it was his turn, Vin stood up and walked confidently to the stand. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. He took a deep breath before speaking. Everyone here has heard the story about how I'm fighting to keep my land, Vin said. But what they haven't heard is why it's so important. This land isn't just land to me. It's where my memories are. It's where I found peace. It's where I work hard to build a future, not just for myself, but for my family. He paused, making sure the room understood the weight of his words. The HOA doesn't have the right to come onto my land, build a hotel, and take away what I've worked for. They can't just sweep in and treat me like I'm nothing. Vin's voice grew stronger with every word, and the room seemed to hang on his every sentence. He wasn't just an actor now. He was a man fighting for what he believed in. As he finished, he looked at the judge. I'm not here to make trouble. I'm here to protect what's mine. The judge nodded, and the tension in the room grew thicker. The courtroom was silent, as if waiting for the next move. It was clear that Vin's words had struck a chord. But the HOA wasn't done yet. The next day, the court proceedings continued. The HOA's lawyer was relentless, pushing for more evidence and trying to undermine Vin's claims. But Miranda had prepared a strategy that would turn the tables. She had gathered evidence that proved the HOA had made several missteps in their dealings, missteps that could put their entire project at risk. Just as Richard Harper was about to present another argument, Miranda stood up. She had a smile on her face, one that sent a ripple of curiosity through the room. Your Honor, Miranda said, I'd like to present an exhibit that shows the HOA's failure to follow proper legal procedures when acquiring the land for this project. In fact, they never even informed Mr. Diesel about their intentions to build a hotel on his property. The courtroom went silent. The judge looked up, intrigued. What do you mean? Richard asked, clearly rattled. Miranda continued, I have here a copy of the deed, which shows that the HOA had no legal right to develop this land. They skipped over several important steps, including notifying the rightful owner, Mr. Diesel, of their intentions. This is a clear violation of property law. The room buzzed with whispers. Richard Harper's face turned pale as he tried to regain control. You're making a serious accusation, he said, his voice shaky. I'm just stating the facts, Miranda replied calmly. And the facts say that the HOA has no right to proceed with this development. Vin watched from the stand as the judge looked over the documents. It was a pivotal moment in the case. The tables had turned. As the hearing continued, the courtroom atmosphere shifted. The judge, once skeptical, now seemed more receptive to Vin's arguments. The HOA had made mistakes, and their plans were unraveling before their eyes. The case wasn't over, but Vin had made a powerful move that left the HOA speechless. Later that evening, as Vin walked out of the courthouse, he was met by a reporter. The camera flashed as the reporter thrust a microphone toward him. Mr. Diesel, how do you feel after today's hearing? Do you think you've won? Vin smiled. a hint of relief in his eyes. I'm not here to win or lose. I'm here to make sure my rights are respected. And today, I think we made some progress. The next day, Vin Diesel sat in his office, looking over the latest offer from the HOA. The email from Miranda had been short, but loaded with tension. The HOA wants to settle, Miranda had written. But the terms are shocking. Vin leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. The HOA had proposed a deal. They would cease the hotel construction on his land, but only if he agreed to give up control of the entire property for a significant chunk of time. In return, they promised to help him with future projects on his land, whatever that meant. He rubbed his temples. This wasn't a simple property dispute anymore. This was a game of power, and the HOA was trying to play him. But the conditions they were offering weren't just insulting. They were a direct attack on his sense of ownership. They wanted control of everything he had worked for, all in the name of a partnership. Vin knew this wasn't about the hotel. This was about his land, his legacy, and the right to decide what happens with it. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. He wasn't just defending a piece of land. He was defending his right to live without interference from powerful people who thought they could make decisions for him. He picked up the phone and dialed Miranda's number. "Miranda," he said when she answered. "I'm not taking their deal. It's too much. Let's take this to the next level." Miranda's voice crackled through the phone. "Are you sure? They're pressuring us. The media's getting involved, and it's only going to get worse." Vin stood up, his eyes narrowing as he glanced out the window. "I've worked too hard for too long. They can't just walk in here and try to take everything away. I'm not letting them." Miranda paused. "All right, we'll move forward with the legal battle, but we need something big to turn the tide in our favor. If we can prove that the HOA is trying to manipulate the system, we've got a much stronger case." Vin nodded, determination flooding his veins. "Let's bring them down." A few days later, Vin and Miranda were back in court. The stakes had never been higher. The judge called the proceedings to order, but this time, something was different. The atmosphere in the courtroom was charged, and everyone could feel that this would be the moment that decided everything. The HOA's lawyer, Richard Harper, stood up to present his case, but this time his confidence seemed to waver. His eyes darted nervously to the opposing side as Miranda stood up, a folder full of evidence in her hands. "Your Honor," Miranda began, her voice steady but powerful, "we've come across new information that changes everything. The HOA's attempts to settle this matter are based on a false premise. They've been attempting to manipulate zoning laws and push through construction projects under false pretenses. And we have proof." The room went silent. The judge leaned forward, his interest piqued. Miranda continued. The HOA was aware from the beginning that the land they were attempting to develop was subject to several legal restrictions. They ignored these laws in their pursuit of profit. And now they're trying to coerce Mr. Diesel into giving up his rights to the land. Richard Harper's face went pale. He stood up quickly, shaking his head. "This is a baseless accusation. We have every right to develop this land." But Miranda wasn't finished. She opened the folder and placed a series of documents on the table. The courtroom buzzed as she revealed emails, internal HOA memos, and meeting notes that clearly showed the HOA had been plotting to take control of the land without informing the public or following the correct procedures. They had ignored multiple warnings from local authorities about zoning violations, and they had forged signatures on some of the legal documents they presented. Vin's heart raced as the judge began to read through the evidence. It was clear. Now, the HOA had crossed a line. After a brief recess, the judge returned to the bench, his expression stern. "Mr. Harper," the judge began, "it appears there is substantial evidence here to suggest that the HOA engaged in illegal practices to acquire this land. I will be reviewing this case further, but for now, I'm placing a temporary halt on all construction projects on Mr. Diesel's property." The room erupted in murmurs, but Vin remained calm. This was a huge victory, but the war was far from over. The HOA would fight back, and they wouldn't give up easily. Miranda turned to Vin, a slight smile on her face. We've got them on the ropes. This is our chance to win. Vin nodded, but his mind was already on the next steps. They may have lost today, but they won't stop. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. Later that evening, as Vin sat in his office, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Miranda. Vin, she wrote, I just heard something disturbing. The HOA is going to try one last-ditch effort to settle this with you. They're offering a huge sum of money, but it comes with conditions. If you accept their offer, you'll have to give up any rights to the land forever. They're offering millions, but at what cost? Vin leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The game had changed once again. He had a choice to make. Take the money and walk away or continue the fight. But Vin knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let anyone take his land without a fight. Vin Diesel stared at the note, his mind racing. Let's talk. It was simple but ominous. The HOA was making a move, and it wasn't just about the land anymore. They were playing for something much bigger. Control, power, and perhaps a final attempt to break him. He set the note down on his desk and looked out the window. The night was quiet, but the weight of everything that had happened so far hung heavy in the air. His phone buzzed again. It was Miranda. Vin, are you okay? She texted. I've heard rumors they're trying to make a last-ditch offer. We need to be careful, he typed back quickly. I know, just got a note from them, they want to talk. This is it. Miranda's reply was immediate. Don't do anything without me. I'm coming over. Vin didn't want to waste any more time. He knew the HOA would try to pull out all the stops now, threats, bribes, or whatever it took. This wasn't about the hotel anymore. This was about his legacy, his future, and his land. The next morning, Vin sat across from a group of high-powered lawyers in a sleek conference room. They were there to represent the HOA, and their faces showed no sign of concern. They thought they had everything under control. The table was full of documents, contracts, and offers that were meant to convince Vin to give up the land in exchange for millions of dollars. But Vin wasn't interested in money. He was interested in justice. The head of the HOA's legal team, a man named Charles, leaned forward with a smirk. Mr. Diesel, I'm sure you're aware that this is a final offer. We can settle this quickly and amicably. We'll give you a generous payout for the land, and in return, you'll never have to worry about this issue again. Vin looked at the pile of documents. His eyes scanned the papers, his jaw tight. They wanted him to sell everything he'd worked for. The land, the memories, his dreams. He wasn't going to let them take it. I'm not interested in selling, Vin said calmly, his voice steady but firm. I want this fight to end, but not on your terms. Charles smiled. I think you'll change your mind when you see what we have for you. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I think you know that. Vin leaned back in his chair, unfazed. If you think I'm just going to hand over my property for a few $1 million, then you clearly don't understand who I am. The meeting continued, but Vin's resolve only grew stronger. Charles and his team tried every tactic they could. They made threats, dangled larger sums of money, and even implied that continuing the legal battle could ruin Vin's reputation. But none of it affected him. Finally, after hours of back and forth, Vin stood up, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. I'm not leaving until you know this, Vin said, his words slow but deliberate. You may think you have power. You may think money can buy everything. But you can't buy my legacy. You can't buy my land. And you sure as hell can't buy my fight. He walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. Now, let's talk about the real deal. You've crossed the line. You've broken the law, manipulated the system, and tried to take what's not yours. I'm not going to let you get away with it. I'm going to make sure the world knows what you've done. With that, he turned and walked out, leaving the stunned lawyers behind. The legal battle was far from over, but now Vin had the upper hand. He had gathered enough evidence to expose the HOA's illegal activities. He knew the final confrontation was inevitable, but he was ready. The stakes had never been higher.